Welcome back. I'm Melissa Harris Perry, and it's been 85 days since the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting that left 20 children and 6 adults fatally wounded. 85 days since that tragedy sparked a national dialogue about gun control. And in that time, a great deal has happened to keep the momentum going for change. And this week was no different. On Wednesday, former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords returned to the scene of the shooting that left her severely impaired and killed 6 people 2 years ago. Still in recovery, Giffords was only able to offer a few words this week in her unceasing effort to keep the national spotlight on gun control reform. Not to be outdone, the NRA has been ramping up its efforts to block any regulations. And in their corner is the lucrative gun manufacturing lobby, which has seen fantastic earnings in the past quarter. On Tuesday, Smith & Wesson reported quarterly earnings 3 times what they were a year ago, with sales of over $136 million. Fellow gun maker Strum, Ruger and Company had a similarly stellar quarter with sales of $142 million. And on Friday, a new market of potential gun owners opened up to them. Why? Because the governor of South Dakota signed into law a bill making the state the first in the nation to specifically allow teachers to carry firearms in classrooms. But those fighting for gun control are keeping the pressure on. Today, a team of 26 cyclists departed from Sandy Hook, Connecticut, on a journey that will take them 400 miles to Washington, D.C. to honor those 26 lives lost in the Newtown Elementary School massacre. And new polling by the advocacy organization Mayors Against Gun Violence shows support for background check measures is extremely strong, even in Republican-controlled districts. They found that on average in the 41 congressional districts polled, 89% of voters supported background checks for all gun sales. And yet the will of the people is not getting through to those on Capitol Hill. And while there are several bills before the Senate Judiciary Committee, only one has been approved for a vote so far. On Thursday, legislation making gun trafficking a federal crime made it through committee with only one Republican signing on. Despite high hopes for a bipartisan bill expanding background checks to all gun buyers, it stalled in talks this week, signaling that comprehensive gun control reform has a tough road ahead. With me today is the mayor of Bridgeport, Connecticut, Bill Finch. He is a member of Mayors Against Gun Violence. Also, MSNBC contributor and managing editor of thegrio.com, Joy Reid. Dr. Jonathan Metzl, professor of psychology at Vanderbilt University and author of Protest Psychosis. And also, again, Valerie Kaur, a writer and filmmaker and senior fellow at Auburn Seminary. All right, Mayor, is it possible for us to get meaningful legislation on gun control in the next year?
I really do think it is. Mayors have been working very hard on this issue for a long time. My city, unfortunately, very, very close to Newtown. My police chief lives in Newtown. One of our teachers in Bridgeport lost a 6-year-old son, same age as my son, and it really deeply impacted our local community. But I've seen that the debate really has changed. Mayors that were a little more tepid, perhaps because they're in more conservative areas. Basically, everybody's throwing caution to the wind, I think, and saying, listen, the people are really here. They're with us. The wind is at our backs. We've got 89% in your Mayors Against Illegal Guns poll. We've got 81% against assault weapons. So we've got to tighten the gun show loophole. There's 6.6 million guns a year are getting into people's hands without any background check at all. That means people who are stalkers, terrorists, domestic violence, and the like. There's a lot that's been talked about mental health. I think that's an important part of it, but I think the most important thing is we've got to reduce the supply of guns that are out there, and mayors are trying to do that.
But when you say that, when you say reduce the supply of guns that are out there, Joy, that means that folks who are making money, who are making these guns, will have fewer profits, and that really is a sticking point, right? It's not the 89% of people who say get background checks. It's these folks that make this saying, if you want fewer of these, that's fewer dollars in my pocket.
Right, and it's also the fact that the gun industry understands where its market is going, that they're not selling more shotguns, they're not necessarily selling more pistols, they are selling more semi-automatics. So they're very reluctant to sign on to anything that would
Is that because the deer are getting faster?
The deer are super fast and they're aggressive, and they don't, but no, I mean, they're...
How many hunters, shoot more than 2 bullets anyway?
Right, and I don't think hunters are the ones buying the guns, it's people who are doing the survivalist stuff, it's people who are doing the sort of camps that are attached to gun shows where you run off into the woods and pretend that you're in the military, it's that kind of thing, it's gaming. And then it's also collectors. It's people. We did a forum last night. I think the three of us were together, Jonathan and the mayor and I. And I was talking about a guy I met in Mississippi who's a conservative Republican. We had a really great long conversation. He said, look, I didn't have guns. I wasn't even interested in guns. But when we heard that the president was going to be doing gun control, I went out and I started buying them. And then when I heard it was focused on...
Because they'll become valuable.
They're valuable. So you have people who are collecting them too. So the gun industry understands that they've got to support their industry where their bread is buttered. And it's right now on semi-automatics.
You gotta love free market capital. He's like, oh, this is going to be rare. Let me go get some.
But don't forget, it's a product that's not, you don't have any liability. You can sell these things willy-nilly, dump them in the middle of Main Street, Bridgeport, Connecticut, and you've got no liability when they start killing people.
That's right. Even if you don't have an ill intention for it, right, that it's that second and third owner. Valerie, we've talked a lot about Newtown as the sort of moment where the death of children becomes so appalling that we are unwilling to sit still any longer. But before that, at the Oak Creek shooting in the Sikh temple, you've been deeply involved in the community there, and I'm wondering what that community is saying at this moment as we're finally getting some momentum.
Yes, I spent weeks and months on the ground in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, and in fact, in December, I was flying from Wisconsin to Connecticut. The moment our plane landed is when we got the news that the shooting had happened in my own backyard in your city. And so I was traveling from the site of one mass shooting to another, and I think what it's been producing in the Sikh community and every community that has faced gun violence is this realization that it's not any one community struggle anymore.
Right.
That for the first time in recent history, we have a critical mass of people across faiths, across race, across regions, across in all demographics, who are coming together to call for an end to gun violence. This is something new. Beneath all the noise, a movement has emerged, and it's, I think, an extraordinary moment for action. Harpreet Sahni is an 18-year-old young man who lost his mother in the mass shooting at that Sikh Gurdwara last year. He goes to the Gurdwara, the Sikh house of worship, every day to sit in the spot where his mother was killed, in the spot where the FBI wrapped her body, just to be close to her. This young man, this heartbroken young man, this shy young man working with the Sikh Coalition, had the courage to take his story to the halls of Congress. He became the first Sikh American in U.S. history to testify before the Senate, and he called for an end to violence, not just against Sikh Americans, but against all people. And you know what? That room, he wasn't alone. That room was filled with African American, Latino, Muslim, Christian, Jewish Americans, all of these communities that had been touched by gun violence. And so the gun lobby, while it's powerful, while it has a lot of money, I think is no match for the energy in that room.
So, all right, so then help me understand this, Jonathan, because on the one hand, I'm looking at a Quinnipiac poll, right, that tells me that there is enormous support for universal background checks, that 88% of registered voters and even 85% of gun owners themselves and 83% of conservatives say, all right, then what we want is background checks. At the same time, right, I'm looking at gun sales, and gun sales since Newtown, 7 million. So on the one hand, yes, we want to restrict it. Is this because, on the one hand, we all see ourselves as possibly this child in this community, but we also somehow think we've got to be armed against this potential shooter?
Well, we had a tremendous panel last night at NYU that talked about this very issue. What we talked about was just the amazing amount of anxiety, of course, that surrounds this issue. There's a discourse of kind of othering, where it's like, I support gun background checks as an idea, but actually I also need to protect myself against someone else. Joy and I actually found out that we both knew dentists who had started buying pistols to arm themselves against, these kind of random threats of people.
Dentists, like the people working on your teeth.
It's like, don't mix that up with the Novocaine pen. Exactly. And I think what happens when we look at this on a cultural level is that even though people support this idea in theory, that there are historical stereotypes. Certainly we saw the othering of the mentally ill that happened right after Newtown. So remember the NRA press conference where Wayne LaPierre got up, and that press conference was coated with all of these historical terms about the delusional, crazy people, and we saw stigmatizations of mental illness jump up after that, even though, as I think we've seen in the tagline for the show, people with mental illness are far more likely to get shot. They should be arming themselves against sane people.
Well, and in fact so hold on, because there's another NRA moment where they're going specifically on some very interesting, complex ideas. I want to look at this NRA advertisement with their new spokesman, an African American named Colin Noir. Let's listen.
No one wants to fight for the protection. They want the government to do it. The same government who at one point hosed us down with water, attacked us with dogs, and wouldn't allow us to eat at their restaurants, and told us we couldn't own guns when bumbling fools with sheets on their heads were riding around burning crosses on our lawns and murdering us.
So we need guns to protect us from the Klan. I mean, don't get me wrong. Right? Like, there's a historical argument there, but it also feels like
in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Yeah, that's not what we're talking about.
Joy kindly helped me put a piece on thegrio.com this week about this very issue, and there's been a big debate about it. And part of the point I was making on the editorial is that that's actually a piece that's on the NRA website.
Yes.
And so you put an angry black man with a gun on the NRA website. There are not a lot of African Americans who are actually logging onto that with any regularity. It taps into historical anxieties that actually get a bunch of angry white guys to go buy guns.
Right, seeing him.
Exactly.
Right. If I'm
Exactly.
an NRA member, if I'm the person who those guns are for, then seeing him is meant to prompt me to buy the. Oh,
I know. And
we're going to stay right here. I promise. There's so much more. Because when we come back, though, I do want to continue on this question of the folks for whom it hits home. We've got a congressman joining us as soon as we come back.